ニュースピックスタジオの木崎です。今回は心理学者でコロンビア大学ビジネススクール教授のシーナ・アイエンガーさんにインタビューさせていただくことになりました。選択を研究テーマにされているんですが、アイエンガーさんが考える子育てのメソッドについてお伺いしていきたいと思います。アイエンガーさんは1969年インド移民でシーク教徒の両親のもとカナダのトロントで生まれます。その後アメリカに移住されます。3歳で目の疾患を診断されまして、高校に進学する頃には完全に視力を失います。それでも普通の学校に進学することを決定しました。家庭ではシーク教徒の厳格なコミュニティが反映されていて、両親が着るものから結婚相手まで全て宗教や慣習で決めてきたのを見てきました。そうした中でアメリカの公立学校で選択こそアメリカの力であるということを繰り返し教えられることになります。大学に進学後、アイエンガーさんは選択を研究のテーマにすることを決意。それ以来20年にわたって選択についてのさまざまな実験や調査研究を行っています。2010年に出した選択の科学という本はベストセラーになりました。今回13年ぶりにこちらの本を出版されました。Think Bigger 最高の発想を生む方法。こちらですね、2児の母として私も悩む部分がありまして、選択と子育ての部分についてもお伺いしたいと思います。今回のゲストの方をご紹介しましょう。シーナ・アイエンガーさんです。Professor Iyengar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
A lot of NewsPicks users want to know about parenting and how to make choices.
Yes.
You have an 18-year-old son. How do you see the parenting? As a mom and professor, is it difficult for you sometimes?
It's always difficult, right? Because every time you think you figured out something about your child, they decide to change.
Right. We have the common sense. As you're diagnosed with eye condition at the age of 3 and losing your vision in your late teens, what is the background of your challenges and choices?
Well, I think that the reason why I got interested in first studying choice and then later my work on Think Bigger really had to do with the fact that growing up, the 3 words that I most hated were "it's not possible" or "shagata ga nai," right? And every language has the equivalent of that, right? It's not possible, shagata ga nai. And those were words that I often heard, right, as someone going blind, because people didn't know what I could do and how I was going to do things that they saw as challenging. And so I think I was drawn to choice because I wanted to try to figure out what choices I had and what choices I could create.
As you were born in a Sikh family, were there a few choices you think?
I was growing up in New York, and sure, as an Indian family, there were, the people didn't know what I could choose, right? Like as an Indian girl, I was supposed to grow up and have an arranged marriage, and the preference was to become a doctor or an engineer, but that they didn't think was possible. When I would go to school, there too, there were questions, and that was an American school. There were questions like, could I learn to read? Could I learn to write? Could I do math? Would I be able to do science? How was I going to get around? There were always questions about what I was going to be able to do. There was ever a culture that didn't have questions. Maybe the questions were slightly different, but there were always questions. And so it was always up to me to try to figure out maybe I could do more than people thought I could do.
I learned that you went to the public school, and was it good for you there?
I would say when I was very little, they wanted me to go to a school for the blind, and my mom didn't like that idea. And so she sent me to the public school, but because there were so many kids there, I barely learned anything. And so she tried to teach me at home. So I was basically kind of homeschooled until I was about 10. But then we moved to New Jersey, where if you were me, you wouldn't go to a school for the blind. You had to be part of a normal class, but they would have a special teacher come. And that's actually probably when my education really began, was when I had to go to school and I had a special teacher come. And that's when I actually learned Braille and learned how to type on a typewriter and gradually became more independent at learning.
So I think that being independent is the key for you. Your mother told you to be self-reliant. I think that was a good chance to learn about the world, and you try to explore more.
Yeah, I think my mother was a very big believer that I had to be self-reliant. My father died when I was 13. And I think from my mom, her own father had died before she was born. And then her husband dies, when she has these two kids. And so my mother's view, and I wouldn't describe my mother as a feminist, but my mother's view was, she said, you have to stand up on your own 2 feet. I never want to hear you talk about how you're going to depend on a man, because he could do anything. He could die on you. You need to be able to stand up on your own 2 feet and stand up straight. Now, this is my mother talking. This is long before leaning in or leaning out or any of that stuff. She was just being very practical. And so for her, the view was that whatever she had was going to go into investing in my education and my sister's education, because that's what she saw as the key to our future to be able to support ourselves. So I guess I should mention my sister was also born blind.
Yeah, in a way, you have partners everywhere and your family supporting you, to be strong, to explore the world. And that's amazing to hear your story. In what educational context did the phrase "choice is the strength" America emerge? What kind of class was it?
I do think the American dream and this notion that everybody has choice is very much a part of everyday American life, like growing up, it's always people asking you, what do you want? Whether it's what you're eating, what you're wearing, what career you undertake, who you marry. And when I was growing up, I remember going to friends' homes and I would just casually say, yeah, my parents met on their wedding night. And the mother of my friend would be like, if anybody ever did that, I would just die. And, it never occurred to me that my parents might be on death's door because, they had an arranged marriage. But so I think it was more just a part of the culture here, that everything was supposed to be about choice. And certainly there was the concept of the American dream. Certainly there was the Declaration of Independence that's part of the history books. Certainly, growing up, abortion, rather than just talking about it as a medical technology that, could prevent the formation of unwanted babies, it actually became a rhetoric of choice, right? It became pro-choice. And so I guess I just saw choice as this, almost universally glorified thing here. But yet I felt like I wasn't getting enough choice. I wanted more choice, even though America promised choice. It didn't give me the choices I wanted, but I wanted them. And so I was drawn to choice because of the promise it offered, but I understood that I had to figure out what choices I could make.
You told us that humans, if they have too many options, they might hard it to make a choice. Is it right?
Yes, they have a hard time making a choice.
Why do you think that?
Well, because it's hard to keep track. I remember when I first landed in Kyoto in 1995, and I went to the stores, you'd get like a few different kinds of potato chips or toothpaste or ice creams. And I would ask people, well, when you go to Hawaii for your vacation, you must be really happy to have so many more choices. And they'd be like, no, I still like my green tea ice cream or my, they would still basically choose amongst the same things, and they would feel overwhelmed, they said, if they had an entire aisle filled with lots and lots and lots of ice cream flavors. And it was true that life was easier in 1995 in Kyoto when I didn't have as many choices. And so I suppose that's where I first began to wonder about how many choices do we need in order to feel fulfilled.
Let's see, with the parenting too, let's say in Japanese education, there are a lot of choices. There's a cram school, to get into another university, junior high school. Do you think it's not always the good thing to have choices in education, or it's actually okay to have more choices?
So I think the question to ask is not how many. It's the choices that I have put before you have to be meaningfully different, such that you really understand what are the trade-offs. So if I give you a pear, an orange, a banana, an apple, you know what those are, you know how they're different, it's obvious. If on the other hand, I give you 4 different types of pears, and it's not clear to you how they're different, that becomes overwhelming. And you're never going to feel confident that you chose the right one. So I think what's tough about your question is if I have meaningfully different educations and I understand the trade-offs, then yes, having more choices for education is good. If on the other hand, it's like, oh, you have like 20 different schools and nobody can tell you how they're different and nobody can tell you if they are different, and then it's like you're just going to forever worry, like, did I investigate enough? Do I know what they're different, how they're different? What if I had chosen that one or that one or that one?
That's what's going on here, I feel like. There's so many things, but it actually seems to be the same. That's why people are actually confused and they don't know how to make choices here. So I want to talk about the Think Bigger book. As Think Bigger with Japanese version just released, how did you think about the lecture? How did you come up with the idea of Think a Bigger lecture?
So it all goes back to what I was saying, the idea of that I hate the words, it's not possible. And so my research on choice, I began to discover ways in which you could find choices that others may not think were possible. But that still didn't solve the problem that there may not be choices. What do you do if there is no choice for what you want?